Good morning, 14th of December 2020. Here we are, and we are, what would that be, 11 days to Christmas. I'm really excited about the 21st of December to see the Saturn and Jupiter planets line up, and I would be hoping that I can get as far north as I legally can under the guidelines to have some space to see it with a lot less light pollution than... Good morning, Mr. Grant. I hope you are well, sir. It's been a while. I was thinking about you actually over the weekend. I think your other half had put up a video. So, good morning. Right, I'm just going to share some thoughts that I had while I was walking the dog this morning, and if they resonate with you or they make some sense to you, then it's a wee nugget that we can take away with us. On another note as well, the thing about the cold water exposure and coming in, always make sure you're safe, always make sure that you are safe. That's the number one priority here. And I was speaking with a guy that does this cold water exposure as well, and how raising awareness for cold water exposure in mental health. And you know, I've thought considerably about it, and it is one of the things that I choose to do. And I was counting this morning, I am almost on my way to 2 years of doing this every day. And is the cold water exposure aspect of it as significant as taking time out to perform a ritual for myself on a daily basis? And I have came to the conclusion that there may be things that are better than cold water exposure for your mental health. There may be things that are not as effective as cold water exposure for your mental health. But provided that you are giving yourself a pattern, creating new patterns that are different from your norm, if you like, right? So anyway, this is some of the thoughts that I was having while I was walking the dog. I watched a programme a couple of weeks ago about Google and Facebook. I can't remember the name of it, Social Dilemma or something, I think it was called, right? So basically what, in a nutshell, very, very quickly, is I interpreted that as part of what they were saying was that they now have an algorithm, like a tracking algorithm, that can track how long you particularly look at a picture or you read something, an article that might be of interest. Morning, Mr. Niall, hope you're well, Stuarty boy, doing okay? And basically what Google and these powers to be, these digerati powerful people, they're now able to track how long you spend looking at a particular piece of information, and then once they have that, they then start feeding back to you. They then start feeding back to you images and indeed advertisements of things that you've already looked at for 3 seconds, right? So basically what they're doing is that they are tracking your information. They're able to see how long that you've spent looking at a particular image, and then they start in a feedback kind of loop. They start feeding back to you information that you might find interesting, and then, you know, you purchase it or you read more about it, right? And I went, that's exactly what the human brain's like. That's exactly what the human brain is like. It's like, if you start to... Is it that cold? You need to wear a hat. Mr. Lafferty, I wear a hat because I'm as bald as a coot. I've not got any hair in my head, Mr. Lafferty. So, this is like... I get now to wear wigs. They're woolen wigs. I wear woolen wigs now. Cod hats. So, the human brain is very similar to that. And whatever we choose to look at in our mind, whatever image or picture that we choose to look at, it's almost like we start to see that validated in the external world. So if we're having angry thoughts, we see angry experiences. If we're having thoughts of scarcity, the world gives us thoughts of scarcity. If we're having thoughts of low self-worth, the world almost starts to validate your internal chatter, and you get an experience of that, right? So where we focus our attention, and it's very, very hard to keep focusing, sorry, It's really hard to keep focusing when you're sitting in here. This is a real stretch coming in here every morning, I'll tell you. But the similarity between the social dilemma thing that they have on the Netflix about Facebook is very, very similar to how our minds work. So if we start to see experiences of anger, if we start to look at experiences of pain or suffering, or when we start to think about things that make our toes curl, right, and don't make us feel very good inside, right, it's almost like the external world starts to give us a feedback loop, just like the advertisements in Facebook. Went and looked, all I get in Facebook now is like hill climbing stuff, mountaineering stuff, camping stuff, right, because it's what I look at, right? That's what I like looking at. Cold water exposure, all of a sudden, all the adverts I get and all the groups that get presented, why don't you join this group, why don't you join that group? So the algorithm that Facebook and Google are tracking, our brain is exactly the same as that, right? So if we can understand that about Google and Facebook, how empowering would it be to start to realise that about the potential of our own brain? So if our internal negative chatter or inner critic or whatever it might be is continually sending messages of scarcity, of poverty, of anger, of disconnection, of feelings of sadness, or things that you find yourself ruminating about over and over and over again, right? You then start to see that in your external world, and that validates your internal experience and thinks that you're right to be thinking that. But what if you could train your brain, right? Not saying that you can, but what if you could start to train your brain to start to look at healthier habits, healthier experiences, right? And then the world started feeding back. Cafe Hatter, I've not got my glasses on. Yes, agreed, totally empowering. So empowering ourselves to start to train our brain to look for, and I don't want to say positive, but more positive experiences. Starting to train our brain for joy, starting to train our brain for happiness, starting to train our brain for connection, right? And starting to feel slightly more connected. Let me just check what time it is. I'm bobbing about in here. Right, I think I've been in for over 10 minutes, so just wanted to share some thoughts with you that may be useful, may not be useful. Wasn't really a very coherent string of thought, but it's really cold in here this morning, and I had to set the wee studio up. I put a light on the tree over there.